From Penn State Health and Penn State PRO Wellness, welcome to Ask Us Anything About Family Nutrition. I'm Scott Gilbert. Well, as parents, we know it's a lot easier to just grab takeout that we know our kids are going to like rather than perhaps try to cook something new. But easiest is not always best, as poor dietary habits can lead to obesity and all the health problems that can come with it. Today, we're going to discuss how you can create a supportive nutrition environment in your home with Kara Bauer. She's a dietitian at Penn State PRO Wellness. Kara, thanks a lot for being here today. We're going to start by talking about healthy lifestyles and what families should do first. And I imagine there are probably some things we should try to get out of the home before we try to bring other things into the home, right?
Yeah, of course. You know, right now Halloween has just passed, and those treats are certainly okay to have for a time because they are treats. But we want to make sure it's not something that our families are consuming every day. And so it's time to start thinking about maybe donating some of that candy, taking it into the office, and really making sure that we're guarding the food that is in the house. And that also includes any junk foods that are in there. You know, people are so smart. They know healthy foods versus non-healthy foods. And so I think you can take a look at your pantry and your kitchen and your refrigerator and take a look and say, what items would I rather my family not consume, and start to pull those out of the house.
Sure, and it's probably okay to have a bag of chips or a bag of pretzels in there somewhere, but again, not as regular fare.
Exactly, and then along with that, we want to make sure that it's not super convenient. So if you're looking at it from the eye of a child, you want to get down at their level and see what foods are they going to see when they open the pantry or the fridge. And if you do have treats in there for the adults every once in a while, then maybe just stash them in the top corners so that they're a little inconvenient for the children to reach.
Are you suggesting that I sneak my kids' Halloween candy away bit by bit without them realizing it?
Exactly, absolutely.
All right. Don't tell the kids we said that. You're watching Ask Us Anything About Family Nutrition from Penn State Health and Penn State PRO Wellness. We welcome your questions for Kara Bowers, a dietitian here at Penn State PRO Wellness. Just put them in the comment field below this Facebook post, or you can even add them there if you're watching this video on playback, not even necessarily live, and we'll answer in the comment field as well. So I think we've all been through, as parents, the picky eater thing. We want to help kids explore some new options, but we're just not sure how to do that. What are some tips? Starting with, I guess, maybe involving children in the process of making meals, getting them invested in it perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. So anything that we can do to involve them in the meal planning process, the shopping, washing and rinsing the fruits and vegetables, and then also setting the table. So the more we can get their involvement, we're kind of getting their buy-in on the meal that we're serving. Gardening is another great way to do that. If they pick something from the garden that they grew, they're very likely to be curious enough to want to try it. And so the more involved we can get them, the better off we're going to be. And then it's also good to keep in mind, as parents, we have to offer food to a child 12 to 17 times before they're going to accept it. So if we offer it 3, 4, 5 times and they don't like it, that's okay. Continue to serve it and continue to offer it, and once you get up to that 15 times or more, then they're going to start to accept it without wrinkling their nose.
So they may not eat it those first several times, but if you keep presenting it, just don't give up. Also, don't force them, right? Like, what do you think about the philosophy of you've got to eat your broccoli if you want to get dessert?
Yeah, absolutely not. That presents a couple problems. The first one being that we're presenting dessert as a reward. Dessert is not a reward. If we start rewarding with food, it's going to make children want it even more. And so I would recommend giving them a heads up. This is broccoli. This is what it's going to feel like in your mouth. This is what it's going to taste like. It has a little bit of salt on it. And so it's going to be a little salty. It's going to be a little crunchy so that they know what to expect. It's hard to put something in your mouth blindly. And if you put yourself in the shoes of a child, that's what they're doing frequently. So I would present dessert maybe once a week at the most, and dessert is there regardless, but it's not there frequently enough for kids to hold out for dessert.
It's not a must-have, or like you say, a reward for a meal well eaten.
Exactly, and it's for a celebration. You know, for birthdays, it's perfectly acceptable. For holidays, perfectly acceptable.
Right, you're watching Ask Us Anything About Family Nutrition from Penn State Health and Penn State PRO Wellness. Your questions for Kara Bowers from Penn State PRO Wellness are welcome. Just add them to the comment field below this Facebook post. And of course, we encourage you to share this post on your Facebook page. You could even tag people who you know, other moms, dads, others who might find this information helpful. Tag them in the comment field, and this will get their way, I'm sure. So young children, I've heard it's a good idea to try regularly introducing new foods to them, right? I mean, in fact, I can remember when my son was tiny, he loved sweet potatoes. He won't touch them now that he's 12, but kids do when they're really young. It seems like they're a little more open to experimenting.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really important that we plan on that and we continually introduce new foods when they're young. So a new food a week is perfectly acceptable. The other reason why sometimes kids may be less susceptible to enjoy the foods as they get older, well, number one, our taste buds change, but also as kids get older, they start to taste things like candy and ultra sweet foods, and those ultra sweet foods actually alter their taste perception. So he likely doesn't taste the sweetness of a sweet potato anymore without added sugar, because that's what his palate is now used to. So we want to make sure that we guard their taste buds when they're young, so that they can really enjoy the sweetness of some natural foods like fruits and vegetables.
And so once we've got a good mix of things that they like, maybe we've navigated a bit beyond the picky eating stage, what can you tell us about portion sizes? Because I imagine it may be tough, especially as a child is growing, to figure out how to adjust that portion size and also when to say no when they want more. Yeah,
absolutely. So one of the biggest things that we can do that's hugely underestimated is we can use the My Plate guideline. So if you take a child's plate and you fill it with half fruits and vegetables, a quarter grains, and a quarter protein, we're guaranteed to give correct portion sizes. The other thing to keep in mind, if we're giving them good options, then we don't need to limit how much they can enjoy. You know, if we're giving them a plate full of French fries, then yes, we obviously want to limit that. But if we're giving them good options, we want to make sure that they can eat until they're satisfied. And so sometimes that means a child may not eat very much for a day or two, and then the next few days they may eat a lot, and that's perfectly normal and perfectly acceptable. We don't want to force them to eat more than what they want to eat.
Sure, and maybe that helps to answer Elizabeth's question. She was asking if we could discuss some tips for paying attention to portion sizes for adults and for kids. So, I mean, she does bring up the adults point. That's a good point as well.
Yeah, 100%. So once again, I always guide people back to My Plate. So if you think about a standard adult size plate, 9-10 inches, it's probably a small plate nowadays, but if we make sure that it's filled with half fruits and vegetables, maybe a quarter vegetables, a quarter fruit, a quarter protein, and a quarter whole grains, just like the plate, we're guaranteed to have perfect portion sizes. If you eat this and you're still hungry, I always tell people, drink some water, number one, and number two, go back for more vegetables, and if you're still hungry after that, eat more protein. But more than likely, by the time you double your vegetable servings and you get some water in your belly, you're going to be perfectly satisfied.
You're watching Ask Us Anything About Family Nutrition from Penn State Health and Penn State PRO Wellness. We welcome your questions. Just add them to the comment field. Tyler's asking, can you comment on a whole foods, plant-based, low-fat diet for diabetes? What can you tell Tyler about that?
Yeah, so this is a huge topic right now, plant-based diets. And my favorite study that I've read about this in regards to diabetes is they took two groups of people. The one group of people consumed a regular dinner, meat as their protein, vegetables and starch. The other group consumed beans as their protein, a vegetable and a starch. And then the next morning, both groups got a donut. And what they found was the group that consumed beans the night before, the plant-based diet, their blood sugar did not spike as high as the group that consumed the meat. So we don't know a lot about the physiology of why this is happening, but we do know that the more plants we eat, the more fruits, the more vegetables, the more protected we are against disease. So I would highly recommend that. But when you're thinking about diabetes, you've also got to keep in mind carbohydrates. So if we go to a plant-based diet and consume donuts that don't necessarily contain meat, we're not doing ourselves any good. So we really need to focus on that whole foods piece, fruits, vegetables, and then a protein of some kind.
When I look at the My Plate model back here, a place that I'm thinking I often don't follow that is at a restaurant. Because often at the restaurant, if we're ever going to lose sight of what we should eat and go with more of what we want to eat, it's probably there or with takeout. How can a family fit restaurants and takeout into their diet in a smart way?
Yeah, so first of all, I would definitely limit the amount of time that you're eating out. Every time we eat out, we lose control over what goes in our food and also the portion that our family is being served. So if we limit those times, number one, and then number two would be to ask the server for a box as soon as you get your meal. Pack up half your plate and then save it for another meal. And this not only will control your portions, but it's also going to stretch your food dollars much further. And so instead of eating out once, you're going to feel like you ate out twice.
I've also heard there are a lot of foods that are especially maybe salty or sugary in the restaurant setting because they want you to like them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really easy to make a meal that's tasty if you have unlimited fats, sodium, and sugar. And so they're focused on sales, 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 but we want to be mindful at home and really start to look at menus and think about the options. And one place that this really becomes an issue is kids' meals. You know, our kids are offered such crazy food. Kids' meals don't look anything like my plate. And so one thing that you can do is add on extra sides for your children to make sure that they have options besides French fries and applesauce. Make sure they're getting that non-starchy vegetable at their meal as well.
Well, and of course, before the meal, kids want a snack sometimes. So tell us a bit about healthy snacking and how I know how to regulate what goes into that snack and the size of it, especially if it's something that I want to feed them between meals and I don't want it to ruin their appetite for the big, say, dinner.
Yeah, so the biggest thing about snacks is to make sure that we include a whole grain or a healthy carb, so that could be a fruit or a whole grain cracker or something like that, and then a protein. So that protein could be a low-fat string cheese, it could be some peanut butter or nuts, but a small amount of each is really going to make sure that we feel full for longer. If we only consume carbs, our blood sugar is going to spike, come back down, we're going to be hungry again really soon, where if we pair it to that protein, it's going to lower our absorption rate. It's just going to slow it down. So we're going to feel fuller longer and prevent the spike in blood sugar.
You're watching Ask Us Anything About Family Nutrition from Penn State Health and Penn State Pro Wellness. Kara Bowers, a dietitian with Penn State Pro Wellness, welcomes your question. Add them to the comment field below this Facebook post, and we'll post them to her live, or we can even pass them along to her after the fact if you're watching this video on playback and still get you an answer. When it comes to drinks, you know, here we've been talking about food the whole time, but really what kids drink can really have nutritional impact as well, especially because a lot of things we may think are healthy, like juices, are loaded with sugar.
Yeah, so we should keep hydration in mind 100%. So we want to primarily be hydrated off of water. It's tempting to get kids to drink with the sugary juices, or even as adults, it's tempting to be treated with a soda or something like that. And that's okay every once in a while, but we have to keep in mind, even juices, they include so much sugar that we really want to be mindful of how much our kids are consuming. And so for children, the American Pediatric Association has actually said under the age of 1, they should not have any juices. And once again, that comes back to forming their palate. We don't want them we don't want their sweet perception to alter so much that they don't taste the sweetness in actual fruit. And the other thing with the juices is we're missing all the fiber that you would consume in the whole fruit. And so that's a huge component, and a lot of kids these days aren't getting enough fiber, and adults, we're not getting enough fiber either.
As a youth sports coach, I see a lot of kids bring, a lot of small young kids bring a 20-ounce Gatorade with them to practice for a half hour, hour-long practice. That's not needed, is it?
No, it's not needed unless we are exercising at a professional athlete level. So more than an hour or two, we can start thinking about those sports drinks, runners, things like that. But under that time, we should be hydrating with regular water because excess sugar can actually contribute to dehydration. So we want to make sure that we're hydrating properly so that we prevent hydration issues.
I want to go back to fruit juice for a second too, because something I meant to mention. The juice itself can be loaded with sugar, maybe not that great for you, but the fruit that it's derived from is loaded with fiber and things we miss when we drink juice, right?
Yeah. So when we drink the juice, we're still getting all the nutrients. We're getting the vitamin A, the vitamin C, but we are missing that fiber component. And the fiber component is really important, and it's really protective against things like colon cancer, and it really just keeps our digestive system healthy. And so when we drink the juice, although we get some of the nutrients, we're not getting all of them that we would get if we ate the whole fruit.
And so what it all comes down to, we don't want to throw a bunch of statistics out there, but the fact of the matter is obesity numbers are on the rise. They've skyrocketed, especially among children and adolescents. The latest figures from the CDC as of 2016 show that about 39% of adults, 16% of children are seen as obese. So the numbers are headed in the wrong way, aren't they?
Absolutely. And the really sad part of that statistic is a lot of us can become jaded to it because we constantly hear obesity, 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 fix my weight. But in reality, the reason why this is being emphasized so hard is because the next generation is not expected to have a longer life expectancy than what we have. And so in order to help them live as long as we'll live, we really want to make sure that we're feeding them the correct foods and the correct portions. We're being really mindful of everything that they're consuming, and also making sure that they're active for at least 60 minutes a day.
And because obesity has a lot of what we call comorbid conditions attached to it.
Yes, including diabetes, hypertension, heart disease. And what's interesting is we're starting to see these diseases that were once primarily seen in adults, we're seeing them a lot more frequently in children, which is a really scary thing. Even fatty liver disease is being seen more frequently in children. And so we really want to try to curb that now before it becomes a larger issue.
And really, I think what it comes down to is adults, the parents, being a role model, setting the right example, because this kind of thing does tend to run in families. You know, healthy eating habits can be genetic in a way.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that although there is a genetic piece to it, a lot of it is what are we consuming in the household? Whatever we're consuming in the household is what's available to those kids. And so while part of it's genetics, part of it is that role modeling and supplying foods in the house. And one thing that we know is that if we protect the foods that are available in the house, we can actually control 72% of what our family eats. And so that way, the other 25% that they eat when they're out, we don't have to worry about quite as much because we know that they're only consuming the good stuff when they're at home.
That's good stuff. And to do my part as a role model, I have to go home now and take all my kids' Halloween candy away from them. But before I do, anything else in closing?
No, that's great. Once again, the Halloween candy is perfectly acceptable for a time, for Halloween, but we want to make sure that celebrations don't linger on too long.
We're going to put some links to some great content, including from Penn State PRO Wellness, from Kara and her team, on the comment section below this Facebook post. So we'll have a lot more information for you there. Thanks very much for your time today, Kara, and we thank you for watching Ask Us Anything About Family Nutrition from Penn State Health and Penn State PRO Wellness.